Alright, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for the biggest crossover event you didn't know you wanted but definitely wish never existed because that shit fucking sucked, bro? What the fuck? M. Night Shyamalan, you had one job, nigga. Unbreakable was amazing, Split was fucking phenomenal, so how'd you end up shitting the bed with glass, nigga? But, before we get into all that, let's lay some groundwork. So, this is M. Night Shyamalan. He's a notable Hollywood director that made a movie in the year 2000 called Unbreakable. The film is about a man called David Dunn who was the sole survivor of a horrible train crash that killed hundreds of people, and over the course of the movie, with the help of Joseph, his 12-year-old son, and Elijah aka Mr. Glass, this super smart comic book enthusiast with bones that breaks like glass, he slowly but surely comes to the realization that he is indeed a real-life superhero. The big reveal at the end of this movie is that Elijah was the one who caused his train to crash because he wanted to reveal that there were other comic book characters like him in the real world. So David Dunn had him put in an insane asylum, and that's how that movie ends. Very cool, self-contained story with a beginning, middle and end. No need to ever revisit this universe again. So, over the course of the next decade, Mr. M. Night Shyamalan goes on to make a bunch of movies with varying degrees of quality.
My name is Ong.
Until 2016, when he releases a movie called Split about a man called Kevin who has an unorthodox case of dissociative identity disorder that allows him to manifest and contain 23 distinct personalities within his psyche, including a human-animal hybrid with extraordinary superhuman abilities. This hybrid is called the Beast. He developed these personalities as a sort of responsive defense mechanism to shield him from all the horrible abusive things his mother did to him when he was a child. Over the course of the movie, 3 particularly hostile personalities kidnap 3 teenage girls and feed them to the Beast. But one girl escapes and breaks the news to the public. Then, right before the credits roll, we cut to a diner where the news anchor refers to Kevin's hostile personalities as the Horde. A random lady compares him to Mr. Glass, then moves out of the way to reveal David Dunn in the fucking flesh. That's right, bitches! This is a sequel to Unbreakable, fucking 16 years later, both in our time and in universe. So, David Dunn's 12-year-old kid Joseph? Yeah, that nigga's in his late 20s now. And 3 years later, in 2019, Mr. M. Night Shyamalan releases the 3rd and final installment to his Unbreakable trilogy. So now, canonically, Joseph is 31 fucking years old, which is crazy to think about, and even crazier when you realize that these guys are the same actor, bro. That's literally the same nigga, but like all grown up now. It's really fucking crazy, and I'm just so utterly flabbergasted by the fact that bro is older than me by at least a full decade and some change, but I feel like I watched him grow up. The internet is weird, bro. So, here's the premise of the movie. David Dunn goes after the Beast because he kidnapped more girls, obviously. They get into a little scuffle, almost immediately get arrested by the police. Then, they get placed in the same insane asylum as Mr. Glass. So now, all 3 of them are held in the same psychiatric facility under the care and close study of this clinical psychologist lady who specializes in the delusions of individuals who believe they are comic book characters. Her whole thing is that she believes that David Dunn and the Horde are only so powerful because they believe they are, and they only possess their seemingly innate weaknesses because they believe they are bound and limited by said weaknesses.
I saw a video of you fighting near a fire hydrant that erupted. Saw you choke. I think you believe water is your weakness. Look at you, David. You believe you have barely enough strength to stand up.
You can't possibly explain everything away.
So she uses water to intimidate David because that's his weakness. I know, so dumb. Employs the aid of hypnotic lights to keep Kevin's hostile personalities at bay, and pumps Elijah with an ungodly amount of sedatives to prevent him from using that big brain of his. So, he's essentially reduced to a lifeless, drooling shell of his former self. She only has 3 days to treat them and get them to let go of their delusions of grandeur, or else the state will give them all equal life sentences in the asylum. That's it. Now, the crazy thing is, most of this movie is actually quite good, but just like with our Nope analysis, it's that last 30% that really fucks it all up. At the end of the movie, Elijah and the Beast have teamed up against David Dunn for what could only be described as nefarious purposes. Then, why is my mouth so wet? Pause! At the end of the movie, Elijah and the Beast have teamed up against David Dunn for what could only be described as nefarious purposes. Then, there's a big reveal that really should be exalted as one of the biggest plot twists in the history of modern cinema. But because it wasn't properly set up, like at all, and they basically had to finagle and fugazi and finesse their way into the big third act final revelation. It just ends up being nothing more than a very annoying plot contrivance. So the reveal is that Kevin's dad was on the same train that revealed David Dunn as a superhero, the same train that crashed and left David Dunn as a sole survivor, the same train that Elijah intentionally derailed in an attempt to snuff out any latent superhuman abilities within one of its passengers, meaning that Kevin's dad died on that train, meaning that Elijah killed Kevin's dad. That's layer 1. The second layer of the twist is that Kevin only has dissociative identity disorder because he was abused by his mom, who was mentally ill, and Kevin's dad was going to get a doctor to treat her so she would stop abusing their son. But because he kicked the bucket on that train, he never really got the chance to get her the help she needed. So she continued to abuse Kevin for several years, leading to him developing 20 plus identities within his psyche as a sort of defense mechanism against his mother's persistent torture. So essentially, Elijah is the cause of all his suffering and the reason he's so fucking crazy. Now, the problem with this plot twist, as I'm sure is already blatantly self-evident, is that it has too many moving parts, and a lot of those parts weren't properly put in place in the lead up to that reveal, or at the very least, they weren't emphasized heavily enough when they were. The reason the reveal didn't hit the way it was supposed to is because the setup was so negligible that it might as well have been non-existent. So, this is how it all went down. During their group psych evaluation, the therapist lady asked Dennis, one of the hostile personalities within Kevin's psyche, to tell her about Kevin's abusive childhood with his mom, and he's like,
Kevin's father was gonna get a doctor to try and stop her, but he left.
But he left. Not he got on a train and left. Not he boarded a train for a business trip. But he left.
But he left.
Yeah, let's try and remember that shit. Also, this is never brought up in the movie again. Shortly after, we cut to Joseph, David Dunn's 31-year-old son, doing some research on Kevin's dad. Then the camera abruptly cuts away from his screen and we see him step away from the computer in shock. But we have no idea what the fuck it is he's reacting to. This is never brought up in the movie again. Shortly after that, we cut to Elijah as he's looking through some of Kevin's files in the security room of the psychiatric facility. He gets to the section about Kevin's dad, the camera cuts away from the files, then we see Elijah abruptly drop the files on the floor in shock. This is never brought up in the movie again. A bunch of other more interesting shit happens, then 30 minutes later in the third act final battle, the beast is about to attack David Dunn, so Joseph gets in the way to do the big reveal and he falls completely flat on his face. The quote-unquote build-up happens in sequential order, relatively back-to-back with not much time passing between each tenet, and there's even this cool scene where M. Night Shyamalan reveals that Elijah has been fully cognizant this whole time by making us think that we're still watching Joseph on his computer doing research, then revealing a reflection of Elijah on the screen. But it was still ineffective because he failed to lay emphasis on Kevin's dad, while Elijah and Joseph were both doing research on him, and why they both had such visceral reactions while conducting said research. Look, I'm not saying he should have given away the big reveal halfway into the movie, but at the very least, he should have had one of the characters bring up the topic of Kevin's dad again as a way to properly implant the seed in the minds of the audience and build that anticipation or even some small amount of curiosity for the big third act reveal. I was actually closely studying this movie with the intention of creating a detailed analysis around it, and even I had to go back and check if the seed of Kevin's dad was planted in this movie or in Split, its precursor. So tell me, how confused do you think the regular audience that were casually watching the movie was when the dumbass reveal was clumsily blotted on screen out of nowhere? It gets even worse when you realize that the revelation is given by Joseph in an attempt to get the beast to turn against Elijah, which doesn't really make any sense because the main reason that reveal would have any real weight is the fact that Kevin's dad was going to get a doctor to help Kevin's mom, which would have stopped him from which would have stopped her from abusing him and prevented him from developing dissociative identity disorder. But Joseph didn't know that. He wasn't in the room when Dennis revealed that information, and I doubt that would be the sort of thing one could find in public records, just a casual footnote right next to his online obituary. Oh yeah, before bro died, he was actually thinking about getting a doctor for his crazy wife so she'd stop harassing their kid and allow him to have a somewhat normal childhood. Not really relevant to this article about the hundreds of people that died in that train crash, but I just thought you'd like to know. So that's just a glaring plot contrivance right there. And even going back to that first scene with Dennis,
Kevin's father was gonna get a doctor to try and stop her, but he left.
He never explicitly mentioned or even remotely implied that Kevin's dad got on a train, which as we all know is the most pivotal piece of information upon which the essence of the entire plot twist is predicated. So, Not only should Joseph have no reason to believe the information he possesses would have that much weight, but the audience never even knew he ever got on a train to begin with. So, by the time the big reveal happens, we have no prior point of reference to call upon and it doesn't click the way it was supposed to. Which is why I had to go back and double check all the scenes just to be sure I wasn't fucking stupid for being partially confused. Then because Mr. M. Night Shyamalan knows his plot twist was mediocre and discombobulated at best, he immediately makes Mr. Glass explain the whole thing in the most unnatural expository scene I've seen all year.
It's all evidence, you see? If that train crash hadn't happened, Kevin wouldn't have been left alone with his mother. If Kevin's mother wasn't allowed to continue...
Jeez, bro, I've seen more natural plot exposition in a fucking Transformers movie. What the fuck? Then, to make things worse, M. Night Shyamalan pulls yet another fucking arbitrary plot twist out his ass and reveals that the therapist lady is part of some super secret society whose mission it is to conceal and eradicate evidence of the existence of superhuman individuals. So they kill all three of them, erase all the camera footage, and then we get another fucking plot twist, which is actually kinda cool, but it's been thoroughly tainted by the last two big reveals. So at this point, I'm just fucking tired, bro. This isn't fucking Inception, my nigga. I didn't come here for a plot twist within a fucking plot twist. Buy 2 plot twists, get 1 free type shit. No! I came here for a satisfying conclusion to what could have been one of the greatest trilogies in the history of cinema. But you fucked it up. This movie had so much potential, but Mr. M. Night Shyamalan started to do too little in the beginning, then somehow ended up doing too much at the end. Look, subscribe to my Patreon for Weko's Echo. It's my podcast. I review movies and answer your questions. I will react to Reddit stories. Whew. Well, this was fun. Subscribe to my Patreon, link in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next analysis. Bro, it's never not going to be crazy that you can bend metal bars and destroy metal doors, but a fucking puddle is what takes you out.